Hi everyone, welcome to Javaras. Let's continue the discussion on securing single page applications using Spring Security. We have started using OAuth2 for that. In the previous video, we have created an authorization server using Spring Authorization Server dependency. If you have not watched that video, please watch it first. You can find all the related videos in this playlist, and you can find all the source code in this GitHub repository. I will put all these links in the description. This is the architecture which we are following in these videos. We have an Angular application which will be served using UI or gateway server, and there is an authorization server which we have created in the previous video, and there is a resource server which we will create in this video. And this UI or gateway server will forward the request to resource server based on some path parameters. So in this video, we will work on resource server. Resource server is one of the roles present in OAuth2 specification. It is the component which stores and secures resources or data related to the resource owner. In simple terms, a resource server stores the user data, and the data can be accessed using a valid access token. The access token is retrieved from the authorization server by the client. Then the client sends the access token to the resource server in order to get the data. For the client, we have used Postman in the previous video. In this video as well, we will use Postman as a client. To create a resource server, we can use Spring OAuth2 Resource Server dependency. You can find more details in this documentation. I will put the link in the description. Now let's head over to the Spring Initializer website at start.spring.io to create a new Spring Boot project. For the build tool, I will select Gradle Groovy and Java as language. Spring Boot version, you can choose 3.1.2. For the group, I am using dev.javaras.auth2. For artifact, I am using resource server auth2. Packaging will be jar and Java version is 17. To create a auth2 resource server, we need only one dependency, which is auth2 resource server. But this resource server will have some endpoint as well so that we can access the resource. For that, we need a web dependency as well, Spring Web. And we can generate this project. It will download a zip file and we can unzip that file and open it in an IDE. I have already opened it in IntelliJ IDEA. So this auth server auth2 is the authorization server which we created in the previous video. And this resource server auth2 is the resource server which we just created. If we go to build.gradle, you can find two dependencies here. First is Spring Boot Starter auth2 resource server, which is used to create a resource server. The second is Spring Boot Starter Web, which is used to create web endpoints. Now let's create a REST controller in resource server. So go to source main Java, right click new Java class, and I want to create this controller inside controllers package. So we can specify controllers dot name of the controller. Let's say hello controller. Hello controller. And to make it a REST controller, annotate it with REST controller. And let's create a method inside this controller. Let's say public. It will return map of string and string hello, and let's return a map with one key. So we can say collections dot singleton map. Key will be text and value will be hello. And to make it a REST endpoint, let's annotate with get mapping and path will be hello. So now this is accessible at get localhost 8080 hello, this endpoint. But I don't want to run the resource server on port 8080. I want to run it on port 8082. So go to resources, application.properties, and specify the port here, 8082. Now let's head over to the Spring Resources Server documentation to configure the resource server. Since we are using JWT tokens, I will click on JWT in the left panel. And as we can see, the minimal configuration for the resource server needs only the issuer URI. This issuer URI. That means who issued the access token, which is none other than the authorization server. And we have already created authorization server in the previous video. Let's specify this configuration in the application.properties file of the resource server. Go to the application.properties and specify spring.security.auth2.resource-server.jwt.issuer URI. And its value will be URL of the authorization server. And that will be http localhost 8083. Since the authorization server will run on port 8083, we have specified that in the previous video. So that is the issuer URI. Now let's start the resource server. Go to main class here and run it. Let's also start the authorization server. Go to authorization server's main method and start it as well. And we can see the resource server is running on port 8082 and authorization server is running on port 8083. Now to test it whether the integration of resource server and authorization server is working or not, we will use Postman as a client. So open Postman, click on new request here. And first let's try without any authentication. Just send a request to localhost 8082 hello this endpoint and click on send. And we can see we got 401 unauthorized. Don't get confused with unauthorized here. When we are not logged in, we get 401 unauthorized status, and when we are not authorized, we get 403 forbidden status back. That's just how it is. Now let's send the request again with an access token. But how do we get the access token? The access token is retrieved by the client from the authorization server. For now, the Postman is acting as a client, so we will use that. Also, we have already seen how to get the access token from the authorization server using Postman Client in the previous video. But let's see again how to do that. First, go to the authorization tab here. For the type, select OAuth 2.0. For add authorization data to select request header. That means the access token will be sent in request headers, which is the default mechanism to send the token to resource server. Now let's delete all the previous tokens and header prefix will be bearer. And let's specify few things in configure new token section. Token name can be anything. For grant type, select authorization code. For callback URL, specify the redirect URL which we have mentioned while creating the client in the authorization server. Which is if you go to the authorization server, this configuration, and we created a bean of type registered client repository, which is responsible to fetch all the registered client for this authorization server. And we created one client. For this client, we specified redirect URI to be this one. So let's specify this here. So this is the same. To get the auth URL and access token URL, we need another endpoint which is called OpenID configuration endpoint. Now let's see how to do that. So let's go to application.properties. So this is the issuer URI. To get the OpenID configuration endpoint, first write issuer URI and append dot well known slash OpenID configuration. For now, the issuer URI is this one. I will copy it and paste it here. So this is the OpenID configuration endpoint. Let's copy it and send one request here. We can see all the information about the issuer which we need. For now, we need an authorization code endpoint and token endpoint. So copy the value of authorization endpoint and put it in the auth URL, and copy the value of token endpoint and put it in the access token URL. Now we need to specify client ID and client secret. So this also we can get it from authorization server. When we created a client, we specified client ID and client secret. So these are the client ID and client secret which we need to mention here. Now is scope. So we have defined these two scope for this client, and out of all the scopes which we have defined here, we can request for any number of scopes, but they should have been defined here. So we defined two scopes. First is OIDC scope.profile, which is a string and its value is profile in small case. Second is OpenID, and OpenID is used for getting the user's information for authentication. So we have specified these two scopes here, and we don't need to specify state here. And for client authentication, let's specify send as basic auth header, because in here we have specified client authentication method as client secret basic. So we need to pass the client ID and client secret. So we are passing it in request header. And let's click on get new access token. So we are redirected to the sign in page of the authorization server, and this page is located at the authorization code endpoint. That's why we need to specify this auth URL here. So let's specify the username, and in the authorization server we have specified one user with username Javarus and password pass. So let's specify that here, Javarus and pass. Click on sign in. Now we can see authorization complete. Click on proceed, and we can see the access token here. We can see refresh token here and ID token here. So let's click on use token. Now this access token will be sent in the authorization header of the request, and the resource server will grant us the access. Let's try that. Click on the send button, and this time we can see the response here. Now let's see how we are sending this access token to the resource server. Click on headers tab here, and we can see these headers. So you might see this text here hidden. Click this text to see all the hidden headers, and we can see there is a header with the name authorization, and its value is bearer, space, and then access token. That's how the resource server and authorization servers communicate. In this video, we have used Postman as the auth to client, but in the next video, we will create a client using Spring Boot. If you found this video to be useful, please like and share it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching the video. We will meet in the next video. Until then, take care.